everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Charlene, and today I'm going to be doing the Jane Austen Heroines book tag. So as part of our Jane Austen read-along this year, and from In Search of Wonder and I decided to do a book tag this month that you guys can then feel free to do next month during Jane Austen July or whenever you would like to do it. And the tag that she came up with was one based around the heroines from Jane Austen's various novels. Anne did come up with all of the questions for this, so I had no part in that. I will not lay claim to any of it, but I am still happy to do the tag with her this month. So all of the questions will be listed down in the description below, and I will be tagging various people, but if you see this tag and you want to do it, feel free to consider yourself tagged. Also, before we get started, as always, I have some kind of tea with me, and today the tea that I have, as always, is from Adagio Teas because that's where I typically buy all of my teas. But this is a pina colada tea, which has rose hips, hibiscus, apple pieces, coconut, and pineapple. So this is a really good one in the summer. I love it iced. So if you prefer iced teas or you like fruity teas, this is a good one to try out. So now, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the tag. And I will note before I get started, because a lot of these are a book that fill in the blank, a lot of times I have a hard time picking books that fit the various questions because there are so many to choose from. So I decided to go back through all of the books that I read in 2023, the year before I started my channel, and the books I picked are from that year. So this is not necessarily my top pick for these answers based on every book I've ever read, but specifically based on the books that I read in 2023, because I needed a way to narrow this down, and that was the easiest way to do it, without talking about books that you've probably already heard me talk about a lot, because I'm more likely to pick the more recent reads than the books that I read a long time ago. So question number 1 is Lizzy, a book that made you laugh. So this is based around Elizabeth Bennet from Pride and Prejudice, and the book that I chose for this one is 20 Years After by Alexander Dumas. Now, this might not seem like the type of book that you would expect me to pick for this, but the banter between the four friends in this book is so much fun to read. I was laughing out loud several times while reading this. I love it when these four friends get together, whether it's all four of them or even just 2 or 3 of them. It's always so much fun. Question number 2 is Jane, a book with a satisfying ending. So this is also from Pride and Prejudice, and Jane is Elizabeth's older sister. And her story does have a very satisfying ending in this book. So I actually have 2 books that I chose for this one. One is the conclusion to a series that I thought wrapped up well, that I, again, read in 2023. And the other is actually the first book in a series, but I also thought that it wrapped up well for the first book. So the one that wrapped up a series that I thought was done well is A Single Light by Tosca Lee. This is the second book in the Line Between duology, which is about a girl who gets kicked out of the cult that she has been living in since I think she was about 7 or 8 years old. And when she leaves and goes out into the world, she discovers that they are in the middle of a pandemic. And the second book jumps ahead about 6 or 9 months, and the world looks very different. But ultimately, I thought this series wrapped up really well. Then the book that I'm choosing that is the first book in a series is His Majesty's Dragon by Naomi Novik. Now, I do think both the first and second books wrapped up really well. The third book wrapped up on a little bit more of a cliffhanger than the first 2 books did. But I didn't read the second or third book in 2023, so they can't be on this list. But His Majesty's Dragon did wrap up really well. Honestly, the way these books are written, they have a very classic feel to them. It really feels like you're reading a classic historical novel. It's just that it's fantasy, because in this world, there are dragons. But I've really enjoyed the series so far. I haven't continued it yet this year, and I still need to, but I have really enjoyed it, and this first book did wrap up really well. So questions 3 and 4 also go together because they're based on 2 characters from Sense and Sensibility, and question number 3 is Elinor, a book that made you think. So in Sense and Sensibility, Elinor is very much the sensible person, the one who keeps her emotions in check, keeps them very close, doesn't fly off the handle at everything, thinks things through, all of those things. And the book I chose for this one is Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. This is definitely a book that made me think because it had me going back through what did we see in the Hunger Games versus what are we seeing here? This is a prequel to the Hunger Games, and it takes place 65 years before the Hunger Games trilogy. So it's only the 10th annual Hunger Games. It's very early. It looks nothing like it does when Katniss is participating. And just seeing where it started and what the Capitol was doing to get the Hunger Games to look the way that they were going to look by the time Katniss was in them was really interesting to read. I know there's a lot of people who didn't care for this book. I honestly loved it, and it very much made me think. Then question number 4 is Marianne, a book that made you feel. And the book I read in 2023 that 100% made me feel is Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. If you've read this book, you know. But this book will take you on a bit of an emotional roller coaster. You feel for Charlie at the beginning, you really feel for Charlie at the end, and then there's some points in the middle where you kind of feel for him, but you're kind of not necessarily completely on his side because he starts to change a bit. But this book is about a man who has a very low IQ, and he is approached by a couple of doctors who have been working on an experiment to expand a person's mind and increase their IQ. And he agrees to be part of this experiment. He will be the first human subject. Algernon, the titular character, is the mouse that they most recently were experimenting on. And so they do this experiment on him, and slowly his IQ increases. And so we see the change it makes in his life as he suddenly understands more about the world around him, the people around him, and just as his intelligence increases and he learns more and more and more, and he starts seeing the world through a different lens. I don't want to say any more than that because I don't want to spoil the book, but I actually read the short story version of this in college and then found out that there was an extended novel edition that was released later. So I did already know the story going into it, but it didn't stop it from still pulling at my heartstrings. Question number 5 is Emma, a book you want everyone to read. And this is probably the one I had the hardest time picking because it's hard to pick a book that you want everyone to read, not just some people to read. But the one I ultimately went with is A Shepherd Looks at Psalm 23 by W. Philip Keller. I believe is his name. Keller was a shepherd for a while, and so he takes a look at the verses in Psalm 23 and breaks them down and talks about how this relates to someone who is a shepherd and what a shepherd would understand by reading this psalm, or in the case of David, what he understood and was thinking about as he likely was composing this song. And so it was really insightful. It gave so much more meaning to Psalm 23 than it even already had. Psalm 23 is definitely one of my favorite chapters in the Bible, and so getting just even more insight into it was really meaningful, and I would definitely recommend that more people read it. Question number 6 is Catherine, a book that gave you goosebumps. Now, I'm not going to lie, this is what happens when you haven't read all of the books yet. I thought Anne was the main character in Northanger Abbey, but considering this prompt, I'm pretty sure this is supposed to be for the main character from Northanger Abbey. So apparently I had this one and Persuasion mixed up. But a book that I read in 2023 that definitely gave me goosebumps was The Forgotten Book by Mechtil Glezer. This is a YA fantasy set at a German boarding school. And I just realized this is actually very fitting because some of the plot line in this book is based on both Pride and Prejudice and Emma. So this is actually a fitting book to talk about in this tag. But the main character finds a book, The Forgotten Book, and ends up discovering that whatever she writes in this book will eventually come to pass, just not necessarily in the way that she would have thought that it would. There's also a girl at the school who went missing several years ago, and no one knows whatever happened to her. And as you get further into the story, it does end up having more of a gothic feel to it. So there were definitely points where it was giving me goosebumps. Question number 7 is Fanny, a book that doesn't get enough notice. And Fanny, I know, is the main character in Mansfield Park, and that's about all I know because at this point I still haven't picked up the book yet this month. I will get to it soon. I'll probably have picked it up by the time this video comes out. I just haven't yet. But the book that I would pick for this one is Spellslinger by Sebastian de Castell. Now, yes, I have only read the first book in this series, but I did really enjoy the first book. I do need to continue the series. Time has gotten away from me this year. I have had a lot of commitments this year, and it has just meant that I don't get as many books read as I thought I was going to, at least within certain series or by certain authors. But I really enjoyed this book. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of great characters in here, and I never see anyone talk about this series. I have heard people talk about his Greatcoat series, which is an adult fantasy series. This one is actually YA. But in my opinion, it is definitely one of the better YA out there, and I do wish it got more notice. Question number 8 is Anne, a book you read a long time ago and loved, but you're not sure how you feel about it now. And for this one, I decided not to go with books that I read in 2023, because I thought books that I read 2 years ago aren't really books that I read a long time ago. So instead, I decided to go all the way back to when I started tracking books on Goodreads, which was 2016. So 9 years ago feels like a legitimate amount of time to say, I loved it then, I'm not sure now. And there were a few different books I could have gone with for this one. But the one that I'm ultimately going to go with is Me Before You by Jojo Moyes. Now, I know there is a lot of controversy around this book, mostly because of how the book ends. And I understood the controversy at the time. I did not agree with the character's decisions at the end of the book, but I really liked the majority of the story. I liked the emotions and the feelings of the characters that it explored in this book, and there were parts of it that I thought were really well done. However, since then, I have also read the second book in this series, and I will say the second book I did not care for because it basically repeats the same lesson the character is trying to learn as from the first book, and I didn't understand the point of that. But I also saw some reviews that talked about the characters in the second book feeling very cookie cutter, or maybe it was for the first book, and I didn't get it with the first book, but when I read the second one, I thought, no, now I can actually kind of see it in both books. And the controversy at the end of Me Before You bothers me more now than it did back in 2016. Like I said, I understood it back then. It was just, I'm like, I don't think you're supposed to agree with them necessarily. Maybe she wrote it as you are supposed to agree with them. More so that it's just supposed to have an emotional impact at the end of the book. That was how I took it at the time. But looking at it now, I'm like, maybe it made it look a little too positive in my viewpoint. And I don't think it's something that we should be promoting. So I wish it would have been portrayed more so in a way that says, this is what the character did. It still pulls at your heartstrings. It still makes you feel. But it's presented in a way that we see the main character doesn't agree with this. Whereas when the book wraps up, the main character is okay with the decision that is ultimately made. I don't want to say any more than that. If you haven't read it, I don't want to spoil it for you. But that's kind of where I sit on it now. Is I think it could have been handled differently if the author wasn't trying to promote what happened at the end of the book. But if the way it ended was intentional because she is promoting it, then I'm not okay with that. And then, yeah, the characters feel, and maybe cookie cutter wasn't the right word, one-dimensional. That was the word that they used. But the characters do feel kind of flat. They're just, it doesn't feel like there's a lot to any of them. You get like one or two things about their personalities, and that's about it. And that's all that's really explored. You don't get a whole lot of depth to them. Then question number 9 is Lady Susan, a villain you love or love to hate. And for this one, I came up with 2 books. So the first one I picked because, yes, this person, for the most part, feels like the main villain, or at least the main antagonist in the book, and I do not like this character. And that is Skelly Chase from A Time to Rise by Nadine Brandes. And I'm trying to figure out where to hold this so you guys don't get a glare. He, especially in the first 2 books, he feels like a villain. In this one, he feels a little bit more like a morally gray character. Like, he's somewhat trying to make the best decisions, or trying to make the right decisions, but sometimes it's like right intentions, wrong actions. But there's also times where it just feels like he's just looking out for himself, and whatever's best for him, and whatever happens to anyone else just happens. So he is a character that I do not like. At the beginning of the first book, you really don't know what you're supposed to think about him. But as the first book goes on, you start figuring out, especially by the end of the first book, like, you know how you feel about this character. The other one that I decided to go with is one that it's part of a series where, at least in the first book, because that's all that I had read in 2023, it doesn't feel like there is a main antagonist or a main villain. There are characters that you don't like what they're doing, or you don't like their motives, but there's no clear villain in the first book. But the character that I feel like is the biggest antagonist in the first book is the one that I'm going with, and that is Sadeas, or however you say his name, from The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. And no, he is a character that you do not like. He abuses people, he uses people for his own personal gain, 100% a person who is focused on himself and what he can get from anything, and if someone else gets hurt along the way, oh well. So, apparently has a bit in common with Skelly Chase, now that I think about it, but he's even more extreme, because he is high up politically, and he wants to stay there, and he wants to keep climbing higher. Then question number 10 is to tag some bookish heroines or heroes. And honestly, there were a lot of people I could have picked to tag for this. However, because I didn't want to feel like I was picking favorites, I decided to take all of the channels that I typically watch and usually comment on, at least here and there. Maybe it's not every video, but it's at least some videos. And I went ahead and put all their names into a picker wheel and picked 10 of them at random. So if your name didn't come up, it's not because I didn't want to tag you, it was just what came up on the wheel. I did also make sure that none of the people I tagged were people that Anne tagged, so we at least got some new people. If I didn't tag you, but you want to do this tag, feel free to consider yourself tagged. We'd love to see all of you doing this tag, especially next month with it being Jane Austen July. It would be fun to see this tag make its rounds on booktube. So those are all of the questions for the book tag. I hope you enjoyed this one. I had a lot of fun picking out books for it, even though I did have to narrow down my choices quite a bit, just to make sure I wasn't repeating a ton of the same books that I always talk about, or I'm not trying to pick from the, according to Goodreads, 870 books that I have read, at least that I have listed on Goodreads. That's just a lot of books to pick from, and I didn't want to have to rifle through that many books to narrow it down for each question. So that was the easiest way to do it. However, before I go, I do have one more quick announcement that I need to make. Back in May, I ended up taking a 2-week break. That was not originally planned. It just kind of happened because life happened. My SD card went missing from my camera, and so I got behind on my filming, and just when I was able to film again, it ultimately worked out that I ended up taking a 2-week break. But it was a very short break, and since coming back, still filming videos, I mean, 2 weeks is not a very long break, let's be honest. But since coming back and posting more videos, I am still just getting this feeling that I was supposed to take a longer break. Honestly, when the SD card went missing, I was assuming that I would just be taking a break at least through the rest of the summer, basically from that point until at least the end of August. Like, maybe this was just a sign that I need to take a break for an extended period of time. I didn't know exactly how long, but I figured at least that long. But then I found the SD card, I came back, I started posting videos. I just cut it down to one every other week. And I thought that would be good, that would give me a little bit more of a break. But I'm still feeling that push, that I'm supposed to be taking a longer break and I am not listening. So this is one of the things that I have a hard time with, is when I'm feeling pushed or convicted by the Holy Spirit that I am supposed to be doing something or not doing something, and I don't want to change what I'm doing. And I've reached a point where I'm realizing I'm doing that again, and I can't keep doing that. So I am going to be taking an extended break. I am going to take off through the end of August. My hope, I can't say my plan because my plans are not God's plans, and I don't know what his plans are. But my hope at this point is that I will be back in September. But I am going to take the rest of these summer months off, which is probably not a bad thing because it will give me time to finish planning out our homeschool year for next year, get a couple months under our belt because, yes, we start really early. We start in early July so that we can take about 6 weeks off between American Thanksgiving and New Year's Day. So this will give me time to finish getting things planned, getting things in order, and get a couple months of homeschool under our belt, get into a good routine before I start back with YouTube. So I won't have any regular content on here. I will still be doing the live stream discussions for my book club every month. I will have announcements in my community posts about when the live streams are going to be, reminders of what books we're reading, all of those kinds of things. So if you want to see those while I'm away and not making videos, be sure to subscribe so that you can see those when they go up, because otherwise you're probably not going to see them. I will also be participating in anything Jane Austen related that we're doing for the read along. So that's part of the reason why this video is still going up. We do have plans for July that I will be taking part in, and we have plans for August that I will be taking part in. But my regular content that I normally post on here will not be going up until at least September. It feels kind of weird to be taking off in the summer when it's like more people would actually have time to watch videos. But at the same time, my life gets busy in the summer. We always tend to have more family get-togethers and things like that, and you guys probably do too. So I'm sorry to not be really giving any more notice than this, but this is a decision that I came to within the last few days. So I hope you can be patient with me while I'm taking this break, and hopefully I can come back a little bit more refreshed, and also whenever I come back feeling like, yes, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and not I'm doing it despite feeling like I shouldn't be. So that's all I have for you guys for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and again, even if I didn't tag you, if you want to do this tag, feel free to go ahead and do it. And I hope you all have a wonderful summer, and hopefully I will be seeing you in the fall. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you and give you peace. I'll see you later.